All right, I'm back. Gonna talk a little bit about the NFL, more about the NFL draft. At the end of the day, the NFL draft is coming up now. That's the next big thing in the calendar for the NFL. The Super Bowl obviously just happened. Philly, shout out to the Philadelphia Eagles. I want to talk about some of the worst landing spots for potential top 10 picks, just because I think there's a lot of value for the player, obviously for the team. If you draft someone that doesn't fit your scheme or doesn't play well, as much as it probably is on the guy, there's also some team aspect to it, right? The guy you're drafting with a top 10 pick doesn't just forget how to play football. And so some of that is on the team. However, we're going to start with Travis Hunter because obviously he won the Heisman, played 100 plus snaps each game in college, playing both ways at corner and receiver. I personally think he could play. I don't think he could do that in the NFL, but I think he could play one of corner receiver and then have packages on the other side. I think that's just the way he should be doing it. Which position should he concentrate on? I think he's a better corner than he is a receiver. That's just my personal opinion. I think he's great at both. Obviously, there's no reason for him to limit himself, but if he has to pick one, I think he should pick corner because I think he'd be a top 3 corner in football like very soon. And on top of it, elite corners are not a dime a dozen. Elite wide receivers, each team has a good receiver at this point. It's really like, unless you're fucking Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and like one of those guys, like every team has a good wide receiver. And to me, I don't think a team that's biggest need is receivers should be drafting Travis Hunter because I think a team like the Patriots, I think they're going to draft Travis Hunter with the intention of making him a receiver, and I think that limits his ability to. I think that limits his ability to create value for himself. Coming into this season, I'm going to talk about Abdul Carter. He was seen as a first-round pick, but they wanted him to move from off-ball linebacker to edge defender, and he did. And he was awesome, and he continued to get better throughout the season, and obviously he was a dominant part of the State defense. And now he's in the number one overall conversations. I don't necessarily think I would want him at number one, and I don't think that's a shot at him. He's definitely an elite player, but there's still stuff to work on, right? And I think he's not a finished product. He needs time to hone his technique. He needs more of a pass rush, like bag, as some would say. He needs to improve his hand usage. Similar to Micah Parsons in a weird way. He kind of needs to figure out like a deployment plan to truly figure out how dominant he is. And I think it would be detrimental to him if he gets drafted by a team that sticks him on one side and just constantly hopes he wins his matchup. Not that I don't think he will. They're still going to get results, but I don't think he'll get like the peak efficiency from him. And I think that's the Carolina Panthers. They don't have a shit worth on defense, and I think they would just stick him on the left end and pray that he wins his matchup every time. And I think he will. I mean, not every time, but he'll win it enough to give you good production. But I just think getting him in a great scheme at first, allowing him to continue to develop, would help him so much more. Next up, Mason Graham. He really hasn't garnered that much attention, a lot of it being because Michigan was good, not great, sometimes bad, sometimes great. But I mean, just the defense was obviously fantastic, but they were just constantly underperforming. But I think he's a top 3 guy, like in terms of just pure talent, but he doesn't play a premium position, right? His impact at defensive tackle, it's kind of like you don't really notice defensive tackle unless they're doing things like Aaron Donald was. And I'm not saying he's making plays like Aaron Donald was, but you really don't notice his impact unless you really dive into it. His numbers aren't crazy. And again, it's easier to key in when you just have to key in on the defense. And again, Michigan was not that good, so there wasn't as big of a spotlight on him. But he is objectively, like he was unanimous All-American, but he's objectively the best defensive tackle prospect since Jalen Carter. Like, I don't think it's hard to say that. He's a disruptive pass rusher, a disruptive run rusher. Like, the biggest concern about him is his lack of length. And you're probably like, oh, what does that mean? Well, it's his arm length, right? It's his ability to get an offensive lineman here. And so that way you can kind of shut a block and get to a running back or get to a quarterback. I think you need to kind of let him go in terms of like letting him attack and play to his strengths. And I think a team that would draft him, play him in a one technique, or place him more in a read and react scheme in terms of trying to read what the offensive line is doing is not good for him. And I think the Jaguars would try to do that. That's what they've tried to do with Trayvon Walker. And Trayvon Walker's development has been slowed because of it. Tetairoa McMillan is who I want to talk about next. He's a legit ex-receiver. He's definitely worthy of a top 10 selection. Last year's class, obviously Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas. This receiving class is not that strong, like at all. He's objectively a guy that can be a team's wide receiver one by the end of the season. But the thing is, like, his impact is, or his career, his impact, his draft bad positioning isn't going to be due to anything he's going to do. Like, I think he's objectively fucking awesome. But if you go to a place without a quarterback, it's really tough to get stats and for people to understand how valuable you really are. That team to me is the New York Jets. And Tet was a stud, even with inconsistent quarterback play at Arizona. It's different in the NFL. And the Jets, obviously, and Rodgers probably isn't coming back. I don't really know who their quarterback's going to be, especially if you're drafting someone like Tet at 7. Like, are you going to go get Sam Darnold? Are you going to go get someone? I don't even know. Jameis Winston. Like, who do you bring in? And no offense to Jameis Winston, I love Jameis Winston, but none of those guys are going to come in and help Tetairoa McMillan. Next up, Malachi Starks. Obviously, we don't really usually see safeties this high, especially. I don't think he's going to go 5, but even being in the conversation for a top 10 pick, that just goes to show not necessarily how good he is, but that's true, but a little weaker of the class, especially the top 10. Obviously, safety is a devalued position. Teams tend to value the cornerbacks more. Nothing he can really control there. He might face a draft day slide because of that, which, got out of your control. But he is a great coverage safety. Like, his strengths as a safety are coverage. He showed at Georgia, in his time at Georgia, he can line up in the slot and cover tight ends and running backs and wide receivers on the field and he's got great ball skills, pause, for safety. He can contribute in the box and going downhill, but as a safety, he's much better playing in coverage. The Houston Texans use their safeties in the box a lot. Again, I think he's a safety, so I think he's going to slide. I don't think Houston would be a good fit for Malachi Starks. Next up, Will Johnson. This is another guy that I think, Will Johnson, Travis Hunter, we've talked about two guys that are elite corners. These are the two guys I have highest on my board, or two of the three, excuse me. His skill set hasn't changed, but again, like Michigan wasn't as good, so he wasn't getting the national attention. But again, the difference between him and Mason Graham is he had turf toe and was out for, he missed half the season. Again, turf toe is not going to be a lingering injury. He'll be fine to play. It's not like he tore his ACL or anything like that. But he missed half the season, so a lot of teams, he's generally being slept on. I don't anticipate him having this, but there's definitely a world where he has a draft day slide, especially if he's not able to put up like a good pro day or a good combine. But based on his play, he's worth a top 10 selection. I don't like him going to the Dallas Cowboys and the way they play defense, especially because the defense I just don't like a lot of guys going to Dallas because Dallas just seems like a mess. I don't really like the Cowboys either, and I really wouldn't want to see Will Johnson in a fucking Cowboys uniform. That's a little bit of a bias play, but fuck it. Next up, Will Campbell. This is another guy I'm super high on, right? He's, I have 5 guys that I'm really high on. 4 of them are going to go in the first round, which, no shit, you're high on a lot of guys. Objectively the best blocker in the 25 draft. It just depends where he's going to play, right? You're probably going to slide him inside to guard. I just don't know if he has the measurables to play tackle. Some teams are going to see him as that solution, right? They're going to see him at left tackle. They're going to throw him out there. And other teams are going to slide him inside. He can take full advantage of his strengths and not allow the athletic defensive ends to take advantage of him. And again, you see teams going back and forth in terms of, is this guy an interior offensive lineman? Is he an exterior offensive lineman? No, stupid you sound. Left tackle or right tackle. If you spend a top 10 pick at him, you're probably throwing him at left tackle. You're probably not spending a top 10 pick on an interior offensive lineman. You're fine if you anticipate him coming in and he's going to make mistakes. He's probably not going to be some elite left tackle off rip. And I think leaving him on an island to start his career would be a terrible decision. And I think that's what Cleveland would do, right? I don't necessarily know if Cleveland is in love with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. And I just don't think I don't think Will Tackle would go at 2. But I just think Cleveland would be a terrible spot for him because if you're drafting him that high, you're anticipating him being your left tackle for like 15 years. Next up, Cam Ward. I know how the hell did Cam Ward fall to fall. I'm just doing this based on kind of like the guys that I'm looking at on a screen. I think he has a chance to really go number 1, right? Tennessee Titans are looking for a number 1 quarterback. And this quarterback class isn't the strongest. Your quarterback options for Tennessee right now are Mason Rudolph and Will Levis. Draft Travis Hunter that way. Will Levis is the starting quarterback, please. He's on my fantasy dynasty team. I need to get him. He needs to get some value so I can trade him. And Cam Ward is a top, like, he toes the line for sure between being a top-notch playmaker and trying to do too much. He definitely extends plays way beyond what they should, and, for better or for worse. He definitely had some elite talents at wide receiver and tight end, and Elijah Arroyo and Xavier Restrepo did set the Miami passing record for a reason. But the worst thing of someone like Cam Ward's abilities would be to be on a team without high-level talent around him, or at least decent talent. But I legitimately couldn't name you a fucking Titan skill position player besides Tajay Spears. Like, I just couldn't. And he's running back. Tony Pollard. But still, running back. And I think that would be tough. I don't think it would be the worst spot for him because I think another spot like New Orleans would be terrible. Chris Olave has shown that he just can't stay healthy. Alvin Kamara's 30. I don't even know who else is on that team in terms of receivers. Obviously, Michael Thomas is gone. He retired, or medically retired. I don't even know what fucking Bub Meme. I think the Saints or the Titans are just 2 terrible spots for a player like Cam Ward. Next up, Ashton Janney, the other guy I'm super high on. I don't think he's going in the top 10, but I have to talk about him. He's the Heisman runner-up. He was awesome. 2,600 rushing yards in a season, finishing just behind Barry Sanders' all-time record. That's fucking unreal. Running backs are devalued. I don't know if that's true anymore. We just saw Saquon Barkley dominate an entire NFL season, right? And that's without mentioning Derrick Henry. Christian McCaffrey was hurt, but he's going to come back and be a stud. I don't want to say we're seeing a resurgence on the right running back position, but we're definitely not seeing it be as devalued as it has in the past. And Jaine's awesome, right? Got great vision, great balance, low to the ground running back, a low center of gravity. He's legitimately a top 10 talent. I don't know. He's probably not going to go in the top 10 because a lot of teams don't feel like they can build through the run game. Or he could, to me, the worst thing that could happen to him is if he starts on a team with a shit O-line. Team with a shit O-line and a team with a cutter backfield and a team with questionable quarterback play, especially because of injuries, the Miami Dolphins. I think when you'd walk in there, you have Raheem Mostert, you have Devon A-Chain. I think if the fucking Dolphins drafted JD now, would they? Probably not. But sometimes you look at a guy and you're like, he's too talented for us to let go. I would hate to see JD in Miami. And finally, number 10, a guy that people aren't going to be like, whoa, why are you talking about him? Amari Hampton from North Carolina. I know back-to-back running backs, especially in the top 10, early top 10, draft value. So that's just unheard of. But Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously we just saw that in the 23 draft. That was a blip. That was an outlier. But Ashton Janney and Amari Hampton aren't explosive, but they're awesome. Right, like obviously we haven't seen two top 10 running backs besides those guys since 2017 when Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey went. But Hampton is a much more powerful downhill runner than Janney. He's 220 pounds. He's just a bigger back. I think he needs more of a system around him to be an elite player. In North Carolina, he had a good system. That's why he was featured, and that's why he had good stats. That's not why he had stats, but that definitely led to him having better stats than he could have. You should be asking Amari Hampton to work downfield, not laterally, north-south, not east-west. He needs to be utilized in a scheme where he can be a workhorse. Think more Derrick Henry, and not to say that Derrick Henry can't go east-west, but more Derrick Henry, less Alvin Kamara. And to me, he needs to be in a system where he can be asked to go north-south instead of more like a zone read scheme. And Denver runs a very high-level zone read scheme under Sean Payton, and I think he would be a terrible fit in the Denver Broncos offense. But yeah, that's all I want to talk about. I want to talk about just picks. I know it was weird to see two running backs go at the end, but Ashton Janney and Amari Hampton was a stud this season. So if you want to see me talk about college football or anything else, make sure to comment down below. Again, any video, comment down below. Make sure to like and subscribe. And YouTube thinks you're going to like this video. Find out if they're right.